Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Agile Question Time. I'm Peter Wakeling, and I'm a volunteer for the APM, and I'm a member of the South Wales and West of England Branch Committee. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and you are in a listen-only mode. The session will last approximately 1 hour. You can submit any additional questions you have during the webinar via the questions panel, which is on the control panel on your screen. Following the webinar, the recording of the event will be uploaded onto our APM YouTube account, and the slides will be published on our APM SlideShare account, both of which will be listed on the branch community page on the APM website. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Please allow 5 working days for these to appear. And this session will count towards your CPD. Now, this webinar follows a very successful, highly regarded webinar which Barbara Roberts gave on Agile earlier this year for the South Wales and West of England branch. And in planning this follow-up event, we considered a range of specific aspects which could be covered, bearing in mind the comments that we received from the attendees at that event. But we found it so difficult to choose a topic out of the range of them that we decided as a branch to try an experiment and to do this in conjunction with Barbara. And we invited you to set the agenda for this event by posing the questions you would like to have answered. And we've had a number submitted, and thank you all for that. We're going to see how it goes tonight, but really, this is an event that's really in your hands and up to you. So my advice is to make the most of it. Also, your questions are being asked anonymously as far as the attendees are concerned. So if there's any question you have on Agile which you're feeling a bit uncomfortable about because it refers to your organization or a project that you're concerned with, don't worry, ask the question because Barbara, I'm sure, will give you a very good answer. Now, Agile is the subject, and Agile project delivery has been around for around 30 years now, to my knowledge, and it's been under a whole variety of different names. Perhaps the common theme that I've seen to all these different approaches is that they are iterative. They deliver incrementally, and they progressively refine requirements and solutions in close collaboration with the end user or client. And it's all designed to maximize the benefits realization from the project. Now, Barbara Roberts, our speaker tonight, is an acknowledged authority on Agile methods. I think she lives, breathes and sleeps Agile. She is so much into this. And she is also an expert on transforming organizations to adopt an Agile mindset. And I know that's a key interest of hers. She's happy to answer questions on absolutely anything to do with Agile. So don't hesitate. Barbara, would you like to say a few words before we launch into questions?
Thanks very much, Peter. Well, from my point of view, just one small thing is there aren't any slides. So it's no good expecting a slide set later. So the advantage for me is I haven't had to do any prep for this session at all. I just have a strong coffee and wait and see what comes up. So I'm just really, really looking forward to it because I love these ad hoc, let's see what questions are asked sessions. So let's get going.
Right, thank you. Right, well, the people who raised questions, then there was the opportunity to vote for the ones that they thought they would most like to hear answered. So I'm going to go to the one that achieved the most votes. And this is the question. The lack of upfront planning makes projects more risky. How do you combat this when managing larger scale projects?
Well, that question is true, whether you're doing Agile or traditional. It's not a lack of upfront planning, it's a lack of appropriate planning. So there's a real misconception around about Agile. That people think that if you do Agile, you don't do planning. And actually, we do good planning, different style of planning. We do it differently. But planning is integral to successful projects, whatever approach you're taking. The important thing is that you've got to plan for the right style of working. So, for example, the way we plan in Agile is all plans are collaborative. So the planning is facilitated by the project manager, but not owned specifically by the project manager. The whole team get involved in the planning. But the other different thing that we do with Agile is we talk a lot about this concept of planning horizons. So if you imagine you've got a very large project, so this question was specifically around large-scale projects. So, for example, I'm working with a English or UK and Australia company at the minute, and they're looking at a piece of work that's going to be about, I think we're talking about 3 years. So we definitely need to plan it, and what we've got with this particular piece of work is we've got a big horizon, which is saying, right, over the next 3 years, we think we're going to do 6 drops of about every 6 months, and very roughly the focus of each drop is going to be X. So that's our big horizon plan. Then we look at the first 6 months we're going to work on, and we need more detail on that. So we do a more detailed plan for the first 6 months, what's immediately in front of us. So that fits within the big plan. Then underneath that, we start looking at, okay, 6 months is quite a long time. What are we going to be doing in the next 2 to 4 weeks? Then we have a more detailed plan. So the perception that there's a lack of upfront planning with Agile is actually a misconception, because we definitely plan. And obviously, in any large-scale project, you've got to have additional care. But, for example, if you're committing to a 3-year piece of work, then senior management wants to know, in outline, what they can expect. My problem comes with trying to help people understand that having a very, very detailed plan for the next 3 years is pointless. It doesn't add value. It gives a sense of confidence and certainty that actually doesn't exist. What Agile does with the planning is it gives you a roadmap, if you like. So the analogy that I use is if, for example, I was going to sail from, I don't know, Dover to Bermuda, I wouldn't set off saying, hey, it's Agile, let's see how it goes. I need very careful planning. I need to work out what's my first waypoint. So if I'm going to go from Dover, am I going to go sort of stop off at the, I don't know, south of Spain, somewhere like that, or Portugal? I've got a big picture plan. I've got the big steps planned out. I just don't plan the low-level detail, because I know that I can plan in detail for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Beyond that, there's more and more uncertainty, and the bigger the horizon, the more uncertainty exists. And that means that detailed plans for big horizons don't make any sense, particularly in the modern world, which is so volatile that changes hit every piece of work, everything you're doing. Most of you know you plan to do something. Anybody that was planning a holiday, for example, at the moment, it's so volatile, you've got to plan when to get to the airport, what are you going to do if they cancel your flight. Whereas if you talked about this a year ago, you wouldn't have foreseen these problems. So what we do plan, and we plan in a different way, but there is definitely planning involved. And if it's a large-scale project, then we have to take additional care to make sure that we can tell people the sorts of things they can expect, but without going into the low-level detail. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Barbara. Complete change of approach on the next question, but I can understand how people working in projects might wonder how moving to an Agile method might involve them personally. And the question is, in this day and age where speed is of the essence in everything we do, is the Agile way of working compatible with staff well-being? There is a cost to wanting everything done tomorrow.
Yes. I would, in my experience, I've seen a huge impact on people's well-being working on some traditional projects as well. So one of the things we did when we came away from the description of this style of working, we came away from RAD, Rapid Application Development, changed to Agile. The problem with using the term RAD was that people thought that rapid was the first and the only and sort of major driver. Agile is about being flexible. So, for example, it's giving people messages sometimes they don't always want to hear. So if you want 100% tomorrow and it physically isn't possible, then somebody needs to tell you that physically isn't possible, and then start talking about what we can do, what we can achieve. So we're often talking Agile about the concept that you fix time, fix cost, fix quality, negotiate features. So, for example, early stages in an Agile project, I need to be confident that you understand that we will negotiate features. So if we hit a problem, we don't slip the deadline. We don't ask people to work ridiculous long hours. We say, right, what needs to give? Let's drop the least important things. What can you afford to go without? And again, one of the Agile behaviors, or one of the concepts that one of the Agile approaches talks about, is sustainable pace. As a manager, as a senior manager, I do not want people delivering the impossible followed by burnout. I have a responsibility as a manager for the well-being of the people that I work with, and I want people to come in, do a good job, and go home, knowing that they've done as much as they can do within reason, come back again fresh tomorrow. So people will still think that if you use Agile, you can deliver the impossible. And one of the things we often have to explain is that Agile applies the law of physics, that if it's 6 months worth of work, it will take 6 months to deliver it if you want all of it. If you're prepared to say, look, we don't need all of it in 6 months, but these are the things we absolutely must have in 6 months' time, we talk about a minimum useful subset or a minimum viable product, that gives us some room to negotiate. If you want everything, then we need to talk about where you're going to negotiate. So if you're fixed, you want all the features, you've either got to negotiate on time, slip the deadline, cost, throw more bodies at it, which doesn't actually work, or compromise the quality. So what I do with my projects is that I always start my projects with a discussion about, right, you've got 4 things to work with. You've got time, cost, functionality, and quality. We'd love to deliver everything, but if we hit a problem, what would be the one area that you'd be prepared to negotiate? And quite often talking to customers these days, time is of the essence. It's either a competitor threat, a regulatory deadline, an opportunity that you can't afford to miss, a launch at a conference, something like that. If time isn't the driver, if you do want everything, then you can still do Agile, but you approach it slightly differently. It's a sort of adaptation of standard Agile. But there's never any expectation of flogging people to death, getting them in, burning them out, and then getting rid of them at the end of a project. What I find with my projects is most of the people that work on this love this way of working so much. I actually end up having to tell them to go home because they've done enough for today and I want them back fresh tomorrow. So it's managing people is just as important in Agile as it is in a traditional project, and we want to get the best out of our people. And if they enjoy it and they're working reasonable, sustainable pace, then it's just a better way of working all around.
Barbara, thanks for that. As a quick follow-up question to your first answer to the question on planning, and I think this is a very specific one, but perhaps you could help the questioner. For the short-term horizon planning that you mentioned, can you just say what is the detailed planning document that you would expect the SRO or board would see?
Well, the SRO, if you're talking about a 2-week plan, what we try and do is we make stuff visible so that it might be as simple as a Kanban board showing the work we're going to take on, or it would. The detail is available if you're planning for, say, a 2-week sprint, 2-week time box. Typically what you've got is you've got requirements stories that are broken down into tasks. The tasks are estimated in hours, and that work will comprise the availability of this particular team for this 2 weeks. That is visible day by day, it's updated every day, and we talk a lot in Agile about transparency. So we don't push it to the stakeholders, we just say to them, it's there if you want to see it. Ideally, you set up things like dashboards so people can actually see what's going on. We set up things like burn down charts. They can look at a burn down, see whether it looks good or whether they should be slightly nervous. All of this is made very, very visible. If we're looking at an increment, so let's say it's a 3-month increment, what stakeholders can see is the requirements we've completed. And when we talk about requirements being done, that's developed, tested, accepted by the business, and ready to go into production, even if we're not ready to do a release yet. So this way of planning, combined with the taking full advantage of the transparency of Agile. So in Agile, typically, your 2-week plan is updated at least every 24 hours, if not more often. At the end of every 2 to 4 weeks, your time box plan will update your increment plan, your 3-month plan. Your increment plan is updating your project plan. All of this stuff is visible. So typically, there's a plan for the next 24 hours, a plan for the next 2 to 4 weeks, a plan for the next increment, which is typically 3 to 6 months, an overarching plan for the project. All of those should be visible to anybody that wants to see them.
Thanks, Barbara. Our next questioner has asked this. I have been asked to introduce Agile to a Prince2-centered PMO. What is the best way to do this, as I'm not sure where to start unless the whole team is on board? How can silo Agile work?
So the first thing to do is make sure that the PMO understand what they're getting, because if they're expecting things to comply with traditional rules, there's going to be a lot of stress on both sides. So, for example, I'm sure you're all experts on Prince. Provided people approach Prince whereby a stage is an increment rather than a 2 to 4 week time box, then it fits fine. There's no conflict at all. It also relies on the fact that we need the people using Prince not to be using it like a weapon. So we don't want the project managers to come in with a full-on command and control approach. What we look for in Agile, a good Agile project manager is facilitative, servant leader, there to help the team have what they need so they can do a good job. So then it's important to make sure both sides understand how this works. The team at the 2 to 4 week level, the sprint, the time box level, are managing themselves. People can see what's going on, but that is not managed by the PMO themselves. It's not sort of overseen by the project manager. The team and the project manager here are working collaboratively. So provided you've got the right mindset coming from the PMO, the right mindset from the Prince2 project manager, then it's a case of making sure that in the early stages that everybody understands the rules we're working to. If you start getting sort of continuous interference from the project and the PMO, if they start coming in demanding things need to be signed off at the wrong point in time, then you're just going to stop Agile doing what it does. So, for example, we don't sign off, if we've got developers and testers and business people working with conversations where you develop a bit, somebody tests a bit, business accept a bit, we don't do that formally. It's done very, very informally as a conversation sometimes with messages going between them. Yes, we will sign off or we will approve a requirement once it's done, but we want the minimum formality in the middle so we can get on and do a good job. So we still have formality when needed, but at the lowest levels we don't need this sort of standing over somebody saying, well, you haven't signed that yet.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm going to follow up on that question with this one. In fact, I'll combine two questions that have been raised already this evening. How do you change an organization's mindset towards Agile in terms of behaviors like turning up to sprints on time, etc.? And coupled with, how do you develop a new sprint team so they work smoothly together?
Yeah, it's the people that make Agile really, really interesting. Give you an example, the organisation I'm working on a transformation with at the moment, so this is between UK and Australia, one of their big problems they're dealing with is they have an absolutely rigid governance process, and it's a legal company. So governance is very, very strong, very formal, and this was going to be one of the blockers to doing Agile. So apart from sort of getting Agile going at the team and the project level, I've done a number of briefings for the senior exec to explain to them what Agile means, what's in it for them, what to look out for, so that they understand what they're getting and why it's what they need at the moment. But what we've also done is we've looked at the gating process, because there's no problem with the gating process with Agile, provided the gates sit at the right points. And what we've looked at, they had a committee doing gating, and we've taken representatives out of that committee. For example, one of the gating committee topic areas was support and maintenance. We've taken a representative of support and maintenance and put them actually down as an advisor to the team. So they are approving as we go. As and when they want to, they can just have a look at the documentation, the support stuff that's being created. So what we're doing here is we're making the gating process approved almost as we go. So the formality of going through the gate later on is almost a given, because we've already agreed everything we're going to do. In terms of the behaviours, it is really important that people understand what's important with Agile. So the fact that for Agile, focus is very, very much on time. So I consider it exceedingly rude if people don't turn up, if they don't turn up to meetings or if they turn up late. And what you often find with Agile, when you get an Agile team working well together, there's peer pressure on those that aren't joining in, that aren't turning up. They turn up late or they come unprepared to meetings. They haven't done the pre-work that they needed to do. So it's helping people understand why this matters. And I'll be perfectly honest, there are some styles of people where Agile perhaps doesn't suit them. It's a very, very small pool of people, but if you're a seriously introverted, a sort of micro detailed person that gets very stressed about the future not being certain, then Agile can be quite a difficult environment for you to work in. And I have worked with some technical people who simply just got so stressed without knowing what was coming, sort of not being able to see a plan into the future, that sometimes I've decided this actually isn't the approach for you. There is still work that needs that attention to close detail, that attention to perfection. But what we come to realise in the modern world is sometimes perfection late is the wrong thing. Good enough now and the ability to improve it later can be far more effective. Sometimes you've got to have absolute perfection. It depends what you're building. I mean, obviously, if you're building, for example, the fly-by-wire for the Eurofighter, good enough for the moment, let's see what we need to do later is not going to be acceptable. You know, on safety critical work, the level of quality is huge. But if it's a product, for example, it might be that your first release is going to a friendly audience and you're giving them most of what they want, but not everything. So again, one of the things we do focus on in Agile is that quality is important, but quality is appropriate for that point in the life cycle. So it's not necessarily 100% perfect everything on day one. It might be that we deliver incrementally. We give you a minimum viable product and then some additional features, and then perhaps the third release might be your full product. But team building is important, so I spend a lot of time coaching and mentoring teams, whether it's a sprint team or a project team or even a stakeholder or a governance team, just so everybody understands what's behind Agile, what's the thinking, what's in it for me, what does it mean? Because there's nothing worse than, for example, I've had business people thrown onto an Agile project, so they're literally sent into IT department saying, oh, you're doing Agile, you're going to work with the IT guys. And they're really scared because some of the IT guys have a very bad reputation of being quite difficult. Can't understand why. Some of us have been a bit difficult in the past. But when people understand what it means, you're not there because you're expected to know about IT. You're there because you're the expert on the business scenarios. The IT guys bring the IT stuff. The testers bring the expertise on testing. You are there because you're good at what you do. You understand the problems with renewing insurance or judging risk or whatever it is. You bring that skill with you. So helping people understand what they bring, what the team culture is, and to a certain extent understanding what everybody else is bringing. Different personalities within the team. Everybody brings different things, so you have some people that are focused on detail, other people that are more creative. That's brilliant. I can't imagine anything worse than a team full of people just like me. It wouldn't work. I don't have the right spread of skills. So it's getting across this concept that a team works because we all bring different things, but between us we've got everything we need. So an element of team building, setting clear objectives. So if you're a sprint team working on a sprint of 2 to 4 weeks, what's the goal for this sprint? How do we know when we've achieved the goal? So it's no good the developers thinking, well, I've developed my stuff. What everybody else is doing, I don't care. It's a case of, if somebody else is struggling, how can I help? As a project manager, if what it takes is getting people's coffee and feeding them very nice chocolates or sweets with lots of E numbers in, I'll do whatever it takes to help people get on and do what they need to do. So it's building this team culture is an integral part of Agile. Agile without teams doesn't work. So you need to make the team effective. And that's something that is a good role for a project manager to look after. make sure the team is gelling. Do some, not necessarily icebreakers, because those often break teams, but find ways of introducing the team to one another. Find out little things about them that they can share that make them interesting to one another. So, to me, that's part of a project manager's role to help build a team.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm going to stick with the principle of going for those questions that had the most votes. So this will be a complete change of direction. The question is, what are the disadvantages of Agile?
The main disadvantage of Agile is when it's completely the wrong choice. So I got called into a project that was a 3-year project. It had been running 2 years. It was 2.5 years behind, and they decided they were going to switch to Agile. So please, could I come along, switch to Agile and deliver it on time? And it was a bit like the Monty Python Dead Parrot sketch, because I was trying to explain that coming in, completely changing the way you're working to do Agile is not going to solve the problems, that this project should have been buried a long time ago. But it's equally a disadvantage when people rush to do Agile when actually Agile isn't the right way to go. So it's about, again, this is another of the misconceptions. If you're not doing 100% Agile, you're not trying hard enough. And I hear this a lot in organizations. That's not right. If you've got a repeatable linear process, then a traditional waterfall approach is perfectly acceptable. But if you've got a requirement, if you've got a project that is volatile, that is likely to be hit with change, where the requirements aren't necessarily predictable at this point in time, then Agile is the only way to go. So it's about understanding what is the right choice. But if people decide to do Agile, the disadvantages, the risks to me, are when people come to it with closed mindsets. So it's either the arms folded, I've heard about Agile, it's not going to work, and I'll show you how it's not going to work. So people who are anti-Agile when they're told to do it. But equally difficult from my point of view is people who are wildly enthusiastic about Agile and think it's the answer to everything, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, we're doing Agile, we don't do planning, we don't do documentation, all of which are also wrong. We document, we plan, we just do it differently. So there are disadvantages. The main one for me is when it's the wrong choice, when people haven't thought it through. Agile works well if there's volatility. So another customer I'm working with at the moment, they're doing a very, very big piece of work that is a 5-year strategic project, or program actually. And somebody is saying they want to see drafts of what the future product is going to look like. And I've said, well, you can't possibly do that, because for all you know, in 5 years' time, your future product will be a hologram on a pair of glasses. It won't necessarily be phone or screen. Who knows how it's going to be delivered? We can talk about what sort of functionality, but physically how we're going to deliver it, I can't tell you. And anybody that tries to break that, they're wasting their time, because everything will change. So for me, it's about making the right choices. And if the choice is this is not Agile, then that's absolutely fine, provided you've judged that. The problem for me is when traditional is the default position. I think every piece of work, every project should be judged against criteria that will either send it down a fully traditional route, although I'd use a lot of Agile techniques, a fully Agile route, or sometimes somewhere in the middle. So if you've got a very complex project that needs to be Agile, but it's being done under formal contracts, then it's going to be more formalized than an internal project where the risk is lower. So it's about making the right call and adapting the Agile or adapting the approach depending on what problems you're trying to address. So I love Agile, but sometimes I would say no, that's not the right piece of work.
Okay, so I think you've answered another question, which was, can all projects be run in Agile development? And your answer would be clearly that you wouldn't attempt to do that unless the circumstances are appropriate for it.
No, but my caveat to that is that if you look at the way Agile's designed, Agile is incredibly strong on the people side, on the communication side, on the collaboration side. There's a lot of techniques in Agile, prioritization, time boxing, modeling, facilitation, iterative development, integrated testing, you can still do most of those in a full-on waterfall project and reduce the risk of the big bang delivery at the end. So, if you let me loose in an organization, I will change traditional projects as well, because I'll sell the benefits of, prioritize it by risk. So do the risky stuff earlier, get that out the way, and then build on that, deliver it incrementally.
There's still a common sort of mindset that agile project management methods were developed and are used for software development projects. There's, I think, a degree of uncertainty about what other types of projects really lend themselves to really benefiting from an agile method. What if you could just, from your experience, give some examples of other types of project which are not software development, IT-based, which would come under the umbrella of being appropriate for agile?
How long have you got? There's again, another misconception is that a lot of people think that when you do Agile is Scrum. And Scrum has always talked about software. And the Agile Manifesto, representatives of DSDM, Agile PM, went to help create the Agile Software Manifesto. And our representative, when they said, working software, we value working software over comprehensive documentation. We argued, like anything, to say that shouldn't be software, should be working solutions. If you change the word software to solution and look at the Agile Manifesto again, it works for all sorts of projects. I'm currently working with legal processes. I'm currently working with food manufacturing. So using things like design thinking to help create new products, which then go into a production line. I worked on, for example, I was an advisor for the fly-by-wire for British Aerospace, which was delivered by defence contractors. I've seen it in pharmaceuticals, oil. It's anything. If you're changing a process, ideally, you do it using Agile. We've done Agile on all our extensions at home, and we run Kanban boards. I've got Post-it notes in the kitchen with stuff that needs to be done over the next couple of months, and we sequence it. Agile's a mindset. Yes, it works fine with IT, but the reality is if you look at an IT project, there's no such thing. You're delivering a solution which is delivered using IT. So it's a business project which is delivered using IT. So Agile is suitable for any sort of project. We've done it on, when I was in Australia, we were talking to construction companies who were using Agile. And you think construction is very logical and sensible and predictable, but actually it can be very volatile, particularly in COVID when people were trying to find workarounds for lack of materials. Having an Agile mindset will make any project quite often more viable.
Thanks. Following on, one of the constraints that I think a lot of people see is that in the public sector, project business cases require fixed time, cost and performance parameters to be set in advance in order to gain approval. So in that kind of fundamentally waterfall delivery process within the organization, what aspects of Agile could be used?
So my challenge back to that, I have great arguments and have done for years with the whole contracting process, because you can do sort of fixed price, full-on Agile contracts, but people need to understand how they work. But when you talk about fixing time, cost and performance, I would challenge how many traditional waterfall projects actually deliver on time. In my experience, an awful lot of them don't. So many traditional projects end up slipping time or compromising quality to try and protect time. So in Agile projects, we do fix time. We absolutely, definitely fix time. And we fix cost in terms of people, and we fix quality in terms of every requirement we deliver will meet the quality criteria set for it. Where we're allowed to negotiate is the features. But the only features we are going to lose are the low priority things that we can live without. We can guarantee the minimum usable subset, the minimum viable product, and we fully expect to deliver also the additional value stuff. The stuff we lose is the small fry. So, for example, a very, very simple example, you might have something that says pay by credit card. If we're struggling, we might drop pay by Amex, but as long as you can pay by sort of standard MasterCards and Visa cards, Amex is something that you might leave off because most people can pay another way. You don't have people that can only have an American Express card. It's understanding the detail of the requirements, understanding what is negotiable. And what is negotiable is driven by the business experts that understand where the value lies and where the bells and whistles, the negotiable bells and whistles go, the things we can afford to lose without significant pain. So I think part of this is an educational thing, because to be honest, I think that public sector are missing out dramatically on adopting Agile for some of their projects. But I mean, I know a number of my colleagues do a lot of work with public sector. A particular colleague did a lot of work with Ministry of Justice, and they're doing projects really, really well using Agile. But I've done some consultancy recently with the NHS, and listening to the way their projects are going, to me, as an outsider, it's absolutely horrifying that a lot of this is so old-fashioned and clunky, and it's not working, and they're just not shifting. They're not looking at different ways of working, and they're getting left behind, and it's not doing them any favours. So I think it's changing the mindset, helping people understand that this isn't make it up as you go along, out of control, hack it and hope. This is high quality, value focused delivery on time. And for a lot of organisations, delivery on time is more important than anything.
So I think you've explained that it can be challenging to try and deliver a project using Agile methods in an organisation that really is trying to do things a different way. So a question would be, how do you embed Agile thinking at senior levels in an organisation, perhaps a large organisation in the public sector, which would then allow to properly support Agile project delivery?
So when you start talking to senior and very senior, so when you're talking to sort of an exec level, you need to make sure those discussions are done very carefully. I was very amused a couple of weeks ago. There was a thread on LinkedIn where some guy who just passed his Scrum Master certification was saying that now he felt that Scrum Master had all the skills they need to be CEOs. And with the best will in the world, my colleague and I sort of answered and said, I think you're sort of misunderstanding a little bit. There's a lot more to being a CEO than being a Scrum Master. So for me, the important thing is to explain to senior execs what Agile is, not the jargon, but the what's in it for you. What are the risks for you? What are the benefits to you? Why would you want to do this? And explaining that this is a conscious choice, and it's not going to be you're going to flip today from where you are to tomorrow being 100% Agile, but saying sometimes Agile is going to be the right way forward, having a more flexible mindset. So it's got to be done at a level where people can talk to execs without exposing what they don't know. For example, sort of, I'm sure you know this, but and then you explain something that they didn't know, and they say, oh, yes, I know that. The worst thing is when senior execs look up Agile on Wikipedia and think they've sort of got it and they understand it. At a senior level, it's all about the bottom line. It's about delivering the most value from the people you've got, given that you're never going to be able to deliver everything you want to do because there aren't enough resources around. So it's about thinking about, for example, stopping projects when they delivered most of the value and treating that as success, not failure, and then taking the team and delivering high value on a new project because you've released people to get it started earlier. So it's setting the scene with your senior execs, talking to them in the language that they understand, which is value, benefit, risk, bottom line for the business. How can we as a business do better? How can we improve what we do? All organizations want to do a better job, improve their customer service, improve delighting their customers, hit new targets in the marketplace, see off competitors. It's this sort of language that we need to talk to senior execs about, not going into the senior execs and giving them a half day on this is what Scrum is, because it's irrelevant. They don't care what Agile approach you're using. They want to understand what's behind the whole Agile mindset, the what's in it for them.
Thank you, Barbara. Earlier, you gave an example, I think, based in Australia, of a kind of conflict between the governance arrangements and Agile project delivery. So yep. The question is, does Agile require a modified governance framework from the kind of governance process that we've become used to for a long time?
Yes and no. It depends how rigid your governance is. So this particular organisation, their governance committee was about 30 people. And they only met every so many months, and it didn't align with the projects. So a project will then go on hold while they waited for the governance and for these 30 people to find a date when they can get together. Normally, governance is not a problem for Agile, provided the governance are asking the right questions. So, for example, it's no good going to an Agile project and saying, show me your signed off functional spec, because I won't have one. I'll have an outline spec that's been agreed, but it isn't signed off in detail until we finish the project because it's continuously evolving. So signing it off as you go is pointless, but we are constantly approving, we're constantly revalidating. So it's making sure that your gating process aligns with the steps. So if we take, for example, Agile Project Management, we have a pre-project where somebody's got an idea, then we go into a feasibility. I am used to, and I almost like having a gate at the end of feasibility, because feasibility should be a go, no go. Does this look feasible? Does it look sensible? Could we have some more funding to do the next step? If the answer is yes, then you go ahead and do a foundations. Again, at the end of foundations, that is a very good point to have a gate, because now we've taken the requirements deeper, we've taken the technical solution deeper, we understand more about the risks. Does this still look viable? We've got better estimates. We've got three choices. One is we stop it now because it's not the right time or it's too risky. Two, we've looked at this as Agile, but it looks much more like a more traditional style project, so we'll actually push it down the more traditional route. Or three, we take it forward with Agile. Then in terms of Agile, when the project's actually running, I will like to have a gate at the end of every increment. Let's see what we've got. Should we go ahead and do the next increment? Should we get approval for that? And I'm a rotten boss, really, because I like to have funding gates. The worst thing in the world for me is to give a project all their money at the beginning, and then I'm often being called in to say, can you go in and try and stop this project? Well, if they've got all their funding and their resources are protected, it's very, very difficult to stop them. I mean, it's a bit like giving your teenager all their pocket money for a year on the 1st of January and wondering why they're broke, but they've got all this technology in sort of beginning of March. So for me, because at organisational level you're trying to judge where to spend your resources, where to put your people, which projects you should be running, there should be much more coordination at the senior level. Almost like air traffic control, where you put projects on hold because you've got an emergency that you'll need to bring in. So you might stop a project because this one is sort of business critical, so it's all hands to this one. That should be seen as good management, good organisational sort of strategy. And people take stopping projects or programs very personally as if it's a failure. It isn't. It's just good organisational management. I've forgotten what the question was. Did I answer it, Peter?
Well, I think so. I think so. I mean, really, it's how wide. Is it a general issue? I think this basic question, is it a general issue that in moving from the waterfall kind of approach within an organization to using Agile project delivery methods, that this requires a rethink and producing a modified governance framework to support that?
It certainly needs a discussion. It might not be a rethink. This Australian UK one is particularly problematic, and what we've said is that we've got the important stakeholders as advisors to the project, but I've said that what we'll do for now is we will still go through your formal gating, because this is the pilot and I don't want you to worry about it, so we'll do the formal gate, but I fully expect that formal gating process to be a nod through. So what I'm doing there is I'm doing the best of both worlds. So I'm reassuring them, but I know that the gating process is, it's all proven. The important thing is that if you're introducing Agile, you need to have these discussions. And it may be that it will fit. It may be that there's some tweaking to do. It's not that you go in and say, well, I'm sorry, I'm excused governance because I'm doing Agile. And I have heard that from Agile teams. You have no right to audit me because, my Agile approach tells me I have the right not to be interrupted when I'm coding. I mean, that's not in the real world. Agile has to fit in with governance, with regulatory, with audit. It has to in a large corporate because that's the way large corporates work. So in a large corporate, Agile is always going to be a little bit more constrained than if, say, you and I, Peter, are setting up a little business to sell, I don't know, DVDs at the local market. We don't have shareholders, and if it doesn't work, we can just fold up and do something different. In a large organization, you've got stakeholders, you've got customers, you've got reputation at risk. It's more risky, and therefore you have to be a little bit more careful.
I suppose the corollary is, does employing the conventional or so more traditional governance processes, the sort of information that is required by operating these processes, does that impose overheads which are nugatory, really, for an Agile project?
It can do, yeah. So one of the advantages of being an external consultant is I can go and ask difficult questions and challenge things. It's much harder to do when you've got your name on you're on the company's payslip. I will often say, well, why are you doing that? Do you not feel it's constraining you? Getting behind what's going on here, because people think that by having very, very rigid governance, you're in control. And I know there's ways around governance. I know that you can backdate documents, you can fax a signature, you can put it onto a document when it wasn't there previously. Anybody can break a system if they want to. So for me, having transparent processes is much less risky because there's no place to hide. If it's not going well, you can't pretend it is because people can see it's not going well. So I always challenge existing processes because a lot of them aren't as good as people think they are. They feel they're in control because everything's signed and sealed. But how many projects of the audience, the listeners worked on where it looked like it was going well, but actually it never went live? Went through all the gates, but it was so bad at the end of the day that it was just binned. That shouldn't happen. That's a lot of wasted money. That's a project that should have been stopped much earlier. So for me, good governance is having the ability to stop projects that are failing or stop them when they've delivered enough benefit and all you're left with is bells and whistles. So I think governance is vital to Agile. It's really, really important, particularly in a corporate organization, but it's got to be appropriate, it's got to be done well, and it's got to be effective. And sometimes it isn't currently. And that's not just in Agile projects, it's in traditional projects as well.
Thanks, Barbara. I think I'm sure there are many people would join me in having experience of the sort of thing that you've just described.
Yeah.
We've been scarred by it sometimes.
It's when you get to 99% complete, then the project fails, and people are saying, well, okay, but we were 99% complete, so where is it? And there's no it to look at. So you've done all the steps, but there's no finished product.
Moving on then, coming back to when you should or should not use an Agile methodology. If the requirements for a project have been fixed in stone, is it relevant to think about applying an Agile methodology to it?
Yes, very much so. Because, again, two answers to this, they may be fixed in stone, but whether the details fixed in stone would be a question. How low-level detail have you gone? But if it is fixed in stone, then I've done Agile where instead of fixing time, cost, quality, and negotiating features, I've fixed different elements of the outside triangles. So I fixed time and, I'm trying to think about this, time and features. And you do then have the ability to bring in extra resources or to bring in sub-teams to help if you've got problems. But if I know that from the start, then I can adapt Agile to do that. But then I can do it because I know exactly what I'm doing. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for your first Agile project. If it's your first Agile project, I would go for a traditional approach, but plug in as many of the Agile practices as you possibly can to de-risk it. But yes, you can. You can change it, but you need to know what you're doing.
Thanks for that. Can you, answering another question we've had this evening, can you just explain a bit about how you set success criteria for an Agile project at different stages? Because it's a different approach and the success criteria seem to evolve as you go along to some extent. So how do you go about setting success criteria?
Okay, so the success criteria, there will be some at the project level, some at the increment level, some at the 2 to 4 week sprint time box level. So I'll give you an example. When I do pilot projects, when we're introducing Agile, I always say that we'll do a pilot, don't take my word for it. We'll do a limited pilot, so at the end of that you can decide whether you want to pursue this or not. One of the success criteria I set for my pilot projects is when the project goes live, there will be 0 functional errors. If Agile's working and you've got the right business people involved, the representatives who know what they're talking about, and they're actively involved, then they will make sure that the requirements we build work. So that's one of my success criteria. If you take an approach like Agile project management, for example, we prioritize, and we prioritize using what I must have, what I should have, what I could have, what I won't have this time. And we apply that prioritization at the project level. So when we finish the project, what are the requirements that we absolutely must have working? We then apply a subset of that to the increment in the next 3 months. In this 3-month increment, we're delivering the renewals process. What are the requirements that we must have for renewals to be viable? What are the things that we should have for renewals to be better than just viable, to be good? What are the things that we could have? If we get them, great. If we don't get them, it's no stress because they're not a big deal. So success criteria for me with Agile PM is, are you working Moscow? Are you making Moscow prioritization work? Are you getting the balance right? Because we talk about no more than 60% effort of must have and at least 20% effort on the could have. So we've got room for contingency in the requirements. If you've got 100% must have requirements, you just fix the last triangle, the point of the triangles. You've now fixed time, cost, and quality and features, in which case you're going to fail. So the next thing I look for is, are the business happy with what we're delivering? Are we engaging the stakeholders? So what we look for is, for example, the business will be taking out early versions of what we're creating to show their customers, to show potential new customers to get feedback. Are we dealing with the feedback? If we're putting increments live, acceptance criteria would be that we would not expect any severity 1 or 2 errors coming out of the live solution, as well as no functional errors. So we expect to reduce the sort of feedback that we get. Quality criteria is testing fully integrated? Because testing should be 1 step behind development, not 4 or 6 weeks behind or 6 months behind. It should be an integrated part of what we're doing. So should user acceptance testing or business testing. So if that's not working, then we're breaking one of the fundamentals of Agile, which is that testing is integrated throughout the life cycle. So there are all sorts of criteria that we expect. What are you judging against? If you're just working with Scrum, then are we applying what Scrum advises us to do? If you're doing Agile PM, I can go in and audit an Agile PM project and say, okay, show me your output from Foundations. So that's your baseline, is it? So, show me your baseline set of requirements. What do you mean you haven't got one? So you're building on quicksand. So you can audit against the process, and if you follow a good process, then it follows that the output should be a good output because the process is best practice.
Thanks for that. So in the round, from your experience, what's the biggest challenge that is faced when implementing an agile method of project delivery?
People. Either the people that love it so much they just want to get on and do it, or the people that are very anti and they don't want to do it. So a lot of my work when I'm doing transformations is talking to people, and I don't talk to them in agile language. You know, quite often we'll do training, but then I also do sort of coaching and mentoring, so people can come and quietly ask me any questions, things they're worried about, what bothers them about agile. Helping people that are anti, helping them understand what is it they're worried about. So, for example, if you're a developer, the perception sometimes is I'm a really good developer. You know, I'm going to be expected to produce poor quality stuff. It's explaining to them that that's not the case. Project managers think they lose control by empowering people, by you're being a servant leader. They're saying, well, if I'm not in charge of the plan, what am I doing? You know, well, how do I manage a team? And it's helping them understand how trust works. You know, trust isn't unlimited. You know, trust doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, make mistake after mistake after mistake, and it's okay. Trust is earned. But, you know, letting people do a good job and being there to help them when they need help it's a much more fun way of being a project manager. Facilitative project management is really enjoyable. Some people find it difficult. If you're a real command and control project manager, then it does require a mind shift change. But when you see what a good job people can do if they're left to do a good job, if you use the process as a safety net, so my description of a good process is it provides the safety net so that everybody is working at least to a minimal lower level. But a good process has no constraints. It doesn't stop you being brilliant. A bad process constrains everybody to mediocre. And what I like about Agile is it gives you the safety net, but it doesn't stop you being brilliant. So if you can win the people over, if you help them understand what's in it for them, what they can gain, you know, explain to them that it's not throwing away everything they've learnt. And one of the annoying things for Agile are these people out there that are going around saying, in Agile, you don't do projects. If you're a project manager, well, you just need to retrain as a Scrum Master. That's absolute rubbish. That's not true. A Scrum Master is a team leader. That's all they are. They don't understand project management. And if you are a good project manager working in corporate organisations, you have a brilliant career ahead of you. Ideally, that you've got both strings to your bow. You can do Agile and you can do traditional. This is adding something extra to what you can do, not saying that you've wasted the last 10, 20, 30 years of your career. It's not like that. I could do traditional if I wanted to. I choose not to, and nobody would ask me because I'd spend all my time trying to convert them. But there will be Agile traditional projects out there. There will still be a pool of them, and some of them are very complex and they need really, really good project managers. But there will be a growing pool of Agile projects. So it's something that's well worth getting onto your CV and learning how to do it so that you have options, that you can choose where you want to work. You know, that would be my advice. Obviously, we've got a nice project management audience here. Don't believe the hype that you've been told that, you know, this Agile will take away all the skills you've built. It won't. It gives you something else that you can build on top. And that, to me, is an absolutely key message. So if I can win over the project managers on the projects that I coach, you know, between us, we can change the world one project at a time. That's my role.
Thank you, Barbara. What I'd like to do now is we're turning towards the end of this webinar, but if anyone has any other questions they want to pose, I think you've just got a short window of opportunity to do it. But the question I have here is, with your crystal ball, what is the future of Agile? With the introduction of artificial intelligence and data analytics, do you anticipate that will lead to a wider deployment of Agile methods, or would it rather go the other way and make them less relevant?
Actually, that's a really difficult question. Thanks for that, Peter. The problem with data analytics is when you're doing anything with big data, it's got to be very, very carefully structured so you can actually make use of it. Because the problem at the moment is we're drowning in data. There's more data than we know what to do with. But having said that, I remember years ago working on, when we were talking about sort of data warehouses, the fact that you've got to get the data structured, but then you've also got to be very agile about how that data is presented to an audience with very, very different needs. So you've almost got the agile layer sitting on top of the big data that needs to think about, how do we present this? What do people need this to do? And being flexible, sort of just being not surprised at anything you're asked to do. AI, I don't know, I haven't really thought about that too much yet. You see, there's a lot of possibilities there, but there's also the risk that we sort of might completely lose control and something will be doing our thinking for us. So I think it's somehow we've still got to keep the human part to this as well. So I think it's certainly going to be a very, very useful tool. The concerns about it taking over and then doing all our thinking for us, I think it's a scary thought at the moment. But I'll keep an open mind on that and see how it goes.
Thank you, Barbara. I think we're dead on time, actually. I think we can draw this session to a close. So I'm just going to share my webcam again.
The timing is a coincidence, isn't it, Peter?
Sorry?
The perfect timing is just a coincidence, deliver on time.
Well, it's just good project management, of course. But it's all dependent upon the audience here, because it's the questioners who've been setting the agenda. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone that's attended. It's been an awful lot of people have registered for this event, and it seems to be a highly popular topic. Thank you very much for giving us what I might call a sort of masterclass from a practitioner on what's good, what's not good, how to do it and how not to do it. And I hope that people will be able to take away quite a lot from this evening. I would encourage everyone to please give us feedback on the event, what was good for you, what was not good, in particular, because this was an experiment. We've never done it before, to just have a question time. Is that an event format that works for you? Is it something that we should try on other occasions, perhaps on other topics? And if you have any suggestions for future events, for our branch, we'd love to hear from you. So please take the opportunity to provide your feedback.
Peter, just one thing for me. If there are any further questions within reason, I'll try and pick them up and give a quick answer to them, provided there's not sort of hundreds of them, if I can. So, if they come to me, I'll send them back to APM and you can sort of share them out.
Okay, we'll follow up on that. And lastly, I just want to give a little heads up that we have a major event which we run in South Wales West of England branch with our corporates, which is our annual conference. And we have our next annual conference is on the 11th of October. We're reverting to a face-to-face event where people have been very keen to get back to this format, and it will be hosted on the SS Great Britain in Bristol on the 11th of October. It's already advertised on the events on the APM website, and I would encourage you to have a look at that. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers. This is very much looking at doing something which is relevant to the 50th anniversary of the APM, and also it's looking at how we can learn from our past experience over the last 50 or more years, and use that experience to help deliver to meet tomorrow's challenges, the sort of projects that are required in the future. And I think we're all aware of some of the things that need to be done, and how can we as a project management community help to deliver those things for the future, for the benefit of the country and society at large. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending. I hope you found it useful. And Barbara, special thanks to you, and goodbye to everyone.
Thank you.